Hi everyone, it's Barry from Jerusalem. We just experienced a wonderful feeling. We have the custom to learn Torah all night because it was Shavuot. We had counted the 49 days that I mentioned in the previous video. 49 days are elevations, spiritual elevations. Each day we're coming to where on Shavuot, the holiday that was on Friday here in Israel, Thursday night, many sat up all night learning the Torah as gratitude to Hashem for the blessings that He gave the Jewish people at that time and for all time. So this is the idea that even though something that appears to happen back then, we as Jews are reliving constantly on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, the creation of the world. It starts with the Shabbat, and then it culminates with the nation being created in Shemot, the last book of the Torah, and then in Vayikra, the Korbanot, which were the sacrifices. And we mentioned this week the Menorah in the temple period where they had the sacrifices in Behe Elotecha, and this was the 7-candled menorah that was actually created in they say in one Chazal tell us Moses had a difficulty building this because this menorah was so special. It was made out of one piece of gold, and no one could really figure out how to do it. So it was divinely inspired, so to speak. And the idea is that these 7 branches all face towards the middle branch. And in the Lekutei Maharan, the middle branch is Moshe Rabbeinu. And in other sources, Chazal tells us that this is a Shechina, whose appearance comes in the west. Now the Avot, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they were all raised in the south. The menorah sits in the south, opposite the kotel of Solomon's temple today. That's where the wisdom of the Jewish people lie in the south, but the Shekhinah, the heavenly presence, actually is in the west, in part of that courtyard. So when the menorah stood and 2,000 years ago was dragged away, we're not sure where it was. Maybe there's pictures showing it going back to Rome after the Roman conquest of Jerusalem 2,000 years ago. But as I mentioned before, this connection of Shavuot was 7 weeks after the Jews left Egypt. So we see a complete connection between that night of the Seder. On the second night, we start counting the 49 days. But it's interesting because these 49 days, called the Omer period, finishes by the 50th day, which was this week. Like last week before Shabbos was the 50th day, was on Friday. So the count is more than just 49 days. They count the days and the weeks and the day. So the weeks are 7 weeks, and each week I had mentioned was one of the 7 shepherds, these Torah personalities who were great and who kept the tradition from, well, we start with Abraham, and then Isaac, Jacob, and then Moses, Aaron, and then Joseph, and King David. David, we read that his roots come from Ruth, he was his great-grandmother. This was a convert from Moab. Moab means from her fathers. This was before the Torah was given, and the Torah was given that this type of relationships shouldn't really exist. But the bottom line is, every nation has a call for understanding a little bit what it means. This concept of 7, on 6 days he rested, And on the seventh day, on 6 days he worked, and on the seventh day he rested. So we too keep the Shabbat. It said Machar Shabbat. After the Shabbat, we count 7 years. So what is the 7 years now? Well, we know in the creation, 7 is a sense of completion. So 6 days was each separate days of creation in Bereshis, in the first book. But now he's talking about something else. Now the nation has formed with the chosen 7 shepherds, the 7 leaders to actually be the leaders of the Jewish people as to what is the ultimate purpose, each one uniquely in his connection with Hashem. In last week's Porsche, they had all the princes of each tribe, the 12 tribes of Israel, give their offerings. But it appears that everyone gave the same offering. But it's not so. It's just the opposite. The offering that they gave was the intention and the purpose of each tribe. For example, the tribe of Zebulun, which were the merchant shippers, and Yissachar, who sit and studied and learned Torah, whatever they did as a group was for the united nation for the whole. So in other words, one can go to war and one can learn Torah, but both values up in heaven were seen exactly as the same, and nobody was jealous of anybody. Why do you go to war and why do you learn? No, we don't do that. This is the whole concept of the menorah being one piece. One piece, 7 candles representing the 7 types of individuals, and the power of the individual to be holy. And what does that mean? That means to be united. We see that the menorah was just one piece, united. But a man couldn't figure it out. So Moshe had to go to Hashem and said, listen, I can't figure this out. And Moshe spoke with Hashem. He knew everything. He knew 49 gates of wisdom. Not everything, but that's perhaps in the next revelation, which we're waiting for right now. Because it says in the Talmud in Shabbat, it says each day in Hashem's world is 1,000 years for man. And we're like in 5783 right now. We're close to 6,000 years already. So we're almost Erev Shabbos. We're sitting in a time before the Shabbos. And there is a promise that Hashem will reveal himself, not just for the Jewish people, for all the nations. So this is the meaning of this parsha, Behelotecha, is that we're all unique as individuals, unique as countries. We all have to find the proper respect and honor with each other so that we can do God's will, which is really, he says, the kavod, or the honor, belongs to Hashem. And the Klei Yikar talks about the learning. What is the learning? How does the learning affect us? And he said, Im tilchu bechukotai. If you go in my statutes. Statutes are very, very esoteric. Mishpatim are the basic laws between man and man. But the statutes, the chukim, are the laws between God and the Jewish people and man. Because we are his supposed ambassadors to bring his light to the world. So we have to be united. If the Jewish people are not united, then the world's not united. If the Jewish people are under duress, then we have to do soul searching and thinking what needs to be done to bring the world to a better place. But it all has to do with kavod. Kavod is the honor or respect of Hashem. And the Torah says, the Klei Yikar says something very fascinating regarding this chok, the statute. He said, if you go in my chukotai, he translates it to mean, if you go in my Torah, you will be blessed. This is the message for the Jewish people from the Kli Yakar, that you'll be blessed. In other words, just like Yissachar, the shippers, and the Zivulun, the shippers, and Yissachar, the Torah scholars, it appears they had different roles, but it was all for the same common purpose. That is what we have to find, is a common purpose, not looking at, you're doing this, what's my honor, what's your honor? No, God says, when you learn Torah and mitzvahs, when the Jewish people learn Torah and mitzvahs, what do you gain? You gain the chachma, you gain the wisdom of the Torah. You gave the wisdom of the 7 shepherds. You improve on your nature, on your personality, on your sensitivity for mankind. And this is not just for Jews, it's for all the nations of the world to understand this concept of achdut and this concept of kavod. The kavod of Shabbat is the reason why a Jew needs to keep Shabbat, because it is our testimony to the creation of the world, and that God created it for us to bring to the world. That's the whole concept of kavod for Hashem. We take the kavod for ourselves. The Chazal said anybody takes kavod for respect for. There's a certain self-respect we have to have, but this kavod, this honor, is found as the greater you learn the Torah, the more humble you become. In other words, a person who thinks he's great in Torah, all of a sudden, he goes down. He goes down a lot of notches, because the Torah, the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, and the closer you try to get to Hashem. So what's going on here? There are the 2 mountains. The Kli Yakar says the mountains, at Mount Sinai, they were preparing them for coming into the land of Eretz Yisrael. How was it? They said, the kavod of Hashem is about to come and give us the Torah. His presence is awesome. And when he comes, you have to be careful. So there's a line around the mountain. His presence will rest on the mountain. But if you cross the mountain, you're gonna expire, because his presence is so awesome. And this is what happened at the Revelation. He was saying that this mountain is holy because Hashem is visiting this mountain now. But it wasn't the center of the Jewish world. The Jewish world was to gain these mitzvahs, these 613 mitzvahs, 248 positive mitzvahs like keep the Shabbos, and 365 negative, like don't cook on Shabbos because it's forbidden. It ruins the kavod of Hashem, the honor of Hashem. He tells you what to do, what not to do, and to keep within the boundaries of the law. Now we have Israel. So what's Israel? What's the connection here between Israel? Well, God says, when you get into the land, you give me your first fruits, and you say this blessing. You thank me for what I did for you. I took you out of Egypt. You were slaves, and you come into the land. And he's given us a very interesting halacha. One of the 613 halacha is regarding the land. All the mitzvahs of the Torah, the 613, which are a subcategory of the 10 Commandments, but we have the oral tradition and the written tradition. So you have to understand both traditions in order to understand what is the purpose of the Jew. If you only know the written and you don't know the oral, you don't know anything. Because it's all part of this menorah. It's all part of this unity of one piece, of one nation, of one God, of one world, where all nations need to be together instead of apart, where hate needs to be separate. And the only way you can learn is to be humble, not even in Torah. If you're humble, you respect other people. If you're not humble, you won't. So Torah is this message for the Jewish people specifically. But the ways of the Torah, the ideal, is tries to create a fairness that's natural in the world. So there's one last halacha I have to mention because it pertains to the land of Israel, where all the nations are going crazy and fighting over Israel. For what reason? Well, at Mount Sinai was a mountain. It was a small mountain, okay? 49 days later, he revealed himself. 49 days was Shavuos. This is what we celebrated yesterday, 2 days ago. Well, if you're living out of the country, it was yesterday. So we have to understand that the little land of Israel, the size of the state of New Jersey in America, very small. And this little people, little nation, with so much power, with so much blessing, because of the 7 shepherds, which are reflected in the 7 lights of the menorah. And each person is a light, is a light of, each Jew is a light of Kedusha to be ignited and grow in the tradition of our forefathers. So this little halacha says, my people, I'm taking you into the land, but you should know one thing. In the 6th year of this land is a mitzvah called Shemitah. You let it lay fallow. You don't touch it. It belongs to me. It belongs to the Creator. It belongs to Hashem. And you'll still have what you need. I promise you. And this is the promise to the Jewish people. And every 7 years, we have this cycle in 50 years. So, what does it sound like? It sounds like the Omer count, right? The Omer was 49 days. Here's 49 years, but every 7 years, Hashem says, it's my land. Let it rest. Just like you rest as an individual every week on Shabbos, let my land rest. But he's saying something else here. He's saying it's the connection from Mount Sinai to the land of Israel, that in the 7th year, you rest after 7 times 7, 49 years, just like after 49 days of the Omer, you let the land rest, and it returns to the original owners to protect against injustices, because God says, this is my land. So you have all these nations claiming claiming a piece of this land. And it has nothing to do with anything, because this Sinai experience is proof. And we're still believing in it, and we're still practicing it, and we're still teaching it. We don't have it because there's no more Shemitah, because there's no more temple. But when the temple stood, people were involved with doing all the mitzvahs of the 10 Commandments. This is one of the 613 mitzvahs, to leave the land alone. So why are people fighting over the land? Who it belongs to? Christianity came 70. It came at the zero time. We use the Roman. We use this calendar, the Roman calendar. When the Romans came, 70 A.D., destroyed the temple. There was no more sacrifices. There was no more Shekhinah. God went outside the land with the Jews to watch over them, to see that they come back to the land in the last century, 1948, the rededication of Israel, 75 years old, came to fruition after 2,000 years. And Israel is blessed. We had 1,000 missiles from our little neighbors. It's a small country. 1,000 missiles. Very few people even were injured. Some were also killed, unfortunately. But you got to understand, Hashem's blessing for the Jewish people is enormous. Whoever blesses the Jewish people are blessed. Whoever curses the Jewish people are cursed. I tell this because even my enemy, I don't want them to die. I don't want them to die. I want them to change. Everybody has to change. Yeah, you have to change. I have to change. We all have to change. We all have to stop fighting with each other. We all have to stop being greedy. We all have to humble ourselves to know what it means to acknowledge something greater than ourselves. In the case of the Jewish people, it's one God. In the case of the other nations, it's what they believe in, but they still have to show respect for one another. That's the Torah framework, not just for the Jewish people, for all mankind. So with this, I wish you a good week. Barry from Jerusalem.